Welcome to With Creative Company, a podcast where we dive deep in all things business as creatives. We give our personal take on things that actually move the needle and also chat with entrepreneurs about their experiences in running a business. I'm Jordan. I'm Mayme. Let's get creative. Hello. Hi. How you doing today?
Good. How are you?
How are you doing?
Good.
Today we have our first guest. This is Peyton Dollar. He is really awesome. I just want to put a disclaimer out there that we are both photographers, and this is a podcast for creatives, as we have said. And we did choose for our very first guest to also be a photographer, but we definitely won't keep that up. We will have some diversity in creatives out there.
But yes, Peyton is a photographer. He's an editorial and live performance photographer, incredibly, insanely talented. You've accomplished a lot at such a young age, which is really amazing too. He's worked with artists and brands like Jelly Roll, Chase Rice, Jimmy Allen, the Country Music Hall of Fame, Hypebeast, Forbes, and E! News, just to name a few.
It's a long list.
No big deal. Something that you have also been sharing a lot is your incorporation with film into your digital work as well, which I find incredibly interesting too. So yeah, thank you for joining us. We're really, really excited. And I think Mayme has a couple questions for you.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, before we hop in, I feel like we wanted to just let you introduce yourself because, like, that's our introduction of you, but I feel like you might have a different perspective of who you are. So.
I mean, I think you pretty nailed it on the head, so.
Okay, well, let's just hop in. I think we're going to have a little bit of a conversation about a lot of your work has been live performance, which we know you from that, which is cool. For those of you who don't know, we met Peyton because both of our husbands were on tour with him at the same time, which means that you have the unique perspective that I feel like a lot of artists don't have to deal with, but those that do really, really do. Which is living with your clients on a tour bus. So we wanted to kind of hear some of your thoughts on that and maybe hear about like your very first time living with your clients in a tour and like any mistakes you might have made during that or like things that you don't do anymore from those early.
What you learned from that first experience.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like there's always like this boundary there. Like for me, I always request not to be on the bus with the artist if that's available. I've had one time where I had no choice but to be with the artist on the bus, and that just, to me, there needs to be like a time to like cut off, what you're doing. And I feel like without that space, you kind of miss out on that.
You feel like you're always working.
Or always being looked at as if you should be working, So yeah, I think creating that boundary is extremely important.
So you lean towards wanting to be like on the crew bus with the rest of the crew.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you have boundaries with the whole crew, or do you feel like those only exist for you with like the person you're documenting?
I think it depends on at like what point I'm at with them. Like early on in the tour, if I haven't met anyone and I'm still like, learning what everyone is about, I'm a little bit more, reclusive, and I like to put those boundaries up. But after a while, once I've met everyone, gotten to know everyone a little bit, it becomes a lot more easier to manage that way.
No, that makes sense. Do you feel like there were any like huge mistakes you made early on in the touring lifestyle that you felt like you learned from, or did you feel pretty confident in that early on?
I was pretty confident in that early on. I've definitely had some moments where sometimes I don't give the artist space. And I think it's important to kind of know where they're at because, they don't want to be photographed or videoed all the time, So it's understanding when they want to be and when they don't want to be. And that can be a really, really hard thing to find.
More context clues than, hey, capture this.
Yeah. You gotta kind of like read the artist a little bit without saying anything.
I feel like that applies to weddings too.
Yeah.
Sometimes even on a wedding day, or honestly even at a session sometimes, across the board when you're documenting someone, they get tired.
100%. It's like knowing where they're at.
Yeah. And also like how they want to be portrayed. I feel like that's super important when you're especially documenting someone that is in the limelight, right? People are going to see them perform. And so I feel like they also have an off button too. Yeah. They're not always exactly who they are on stage. So that's a really interesting concept too.
Do you find yourself having conversations about those things with an artist like before a tour, or do you just let it unfold however it does?
I like to let it unfold because from my experience, I feel like the majority of the time, getting the access to the artist beforehand is really difficult. And B, having them even answer that question is difficult to get to. So,
So you just show up and are like, okay, I'm here.
yeah, I'm here. What you see is what you get. So,
Yeah. And that's kind of your style though too, right? More documentary, more just documenting what's happening in front of you.
yeah, like I try not to interfere with what's going on as much as I can.
Yeah.
That's really awesome.
And I know we already gave him like a huge hype up at the beginning, but seriously, like Peyton's work is insane.
Yeah.
Like
Thanks.
it's incredible. It's I think it's some of the best work coming out of the music industry right now, and I'm not being biased when I say that.
It's a huge compliment.
Well, I had to look up Hypebeast because Mayme mentioned it to me and I did not know what it was. And then I looked on Instagram and I was like, oh, they have millions of followers. No big deal. How did that gig come about? Because that's not so much live performance, more editorial.
So I have a friend in New York who used to work for Hypebeast. Him and I know each other pretty well, and he just hit me up one day. He was like, "Hey, like they're looking for someone in Tennessee to take some photos for the PGA Tour. Like, would you be interested?" And I'm like, "Of course."
Right.
So after that, I literally got I got my point of contact. I got the email, and we set it up that day. So
Dude, that's amazing.
So now that you've used a fancy term like point of contact, how do you feel like, is that where most of your gigs come from, is word of mouth, or like breaking into the music industry for like someone who would want to do that? What do you feel like are good like first steps? Like, how did you get your first tour? Or what do you think functions well / really annoys people in the industry when people do it?
So for me, I feel like, at least in music anyways, it's all word of mouth.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to find like the job that you're looking for on LinkedIn or any of these other sites, it's just not how it works. It's super underground. So I think being like as plugged in with your community as much as possible is going to get you like the farthest. Yeah.
I feel like that goes across the board in all creative industries.
Honestly. Is that what made you move to Nashville? Like, did you intend to work in the music industry, like touring as a photographer, or did you kind of fall into that?
On the touring side, I kind of fell into it, but before the touring stuff, I was already doing like a lot of artists like promotion and albums and EP releases and stuff like that here at home before all the touring happened. And then I filled in for a friend for the Jimmy Allen gig, and then I met all the guys on that camp, and 6 months later they hit me up, and that's how I got the gig.
Was that your first tour?
Yeah, Jimmy was my first.
I thought it was. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Well, like I said earlier, Peyton and I would just chit chat on the bus all the time. I feel like I found that out one night.
I didn't know that. That's really cool.
That's really amazing.
I remember walking onto the bus the first night, and Brendan actually, I didn't know who he was, and I was like, "Hey, like, where's my bunk?" And he was like, "I have no idea." Like, he was like, "Is this your first time like on a bus tour?" I was like, "This is my first tour, like in general." And he was like, "Oh wow." So yeah, I remember that.
He showed you the rules of the road.
At least you picked a nice person.
You did. Yeah. You really did.
Probably the best person I could have run into first, honestly.
He's a saint.
So then with that, what do you feel like is the biggest positive that comes with working in an industry where you are so involved every day? Like the fact that you kind of don't leave work. Do you feel like there are huge positives that come with that for your business, or do you feel like it's just tiring?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of positives. I mean, for one, kind of going back to community, I feel like tour gives you the opportunity to like really dig in there, especially if you're with the person for a long time, because you've got at least 12 people who know who you are now. So it's like that can only branch out more. And also, I think the most important thing is like the work, though. Obviously that's a huge positive there, because if you can get really, really great work, then, you can kind of put that out there and people can form their own opinions about it.
Oh, I have a question with that.
Yeah.
I think, again, this kind of goes across all creative industries, but a lot of the times you mentioned, getting the work as word of mouth. And a lot of the times that might also run across and bleed into like, what am I trying to say here? Like not having like a strict written contract for your deliverables, for your pay rate, for the restrictions of that, things like that. Was there a time that it was like handshake deal, or do you have a strict set contract now? Are there any learning lessons that you could share about that?
I've had some gigs, some really, really, really huge gigs that didn't have a contract at all.
Yeah.
That would terrify me.
It kind of scared me a little bit, but I was like, whatever at the end of the day. Because, I was posting the work. I was sharing the work. It's in my portfolio.
Yeah.
Like, as long as I have that right, I'm pretty much
That's
cool.
great. That is the benefit of not having a contract, right? They can't tell you not to post or that you're not allowed.
At least for the touring stuff, when it comes to like the editorial work, that's a totally different story. But for all the touring, it's like usage is pretty free, like whatever.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it's easier for you to operate that way, or would you rather have more like strict information on what you can and can't do, or what they can and can't do?
The times that I've had like a handshake deal, I would say all of those times, the person I'm talking to is usually pretty chill and someone that I can trust too. Mm-hmm. I haven't had a whole lot of instances where like I run into like sketchy people on a handshake deal.
Do you think there would be certain red flags that would keep you away from doing that?
Reputation, I think.
Yeah, that's true. There's definitely, I feel like people talk in any industry, so you know who's who.
Yeah, absolutely.
With it being handshake deals and everything, I think this is a little bit off topic from that, but I was thinking about it while we were talking. How do you manage when you're out with an artist, finding time to do the behind the scenes work that has to be done? Like it's obvious you're photographing their concert and then you're surviving on the bus and all, but where do you find time to edit and to like talk with other clients and things like that while you're out on the road?
And avoid burnout.
Yeah.
So my workflow has gotten like pretty down pat at this point. Every single night after the show is when I'm editing. Like I feel like my job is it doesn't happen during the day. Like I'm usually working from like 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. And during that time, is obviously the show. And then afterwards, I immediately just start editing everything from that day to make sure that I get it all out of the way so I don't have to worry about it the next day.
I think that actually is a great workflow because I know
nice.
a lot of touring photographers that like don't operate in that way.
Yeah. Here's another technical nitty-gritty question. I'm more curious. I don't know if anybody else will care. Has your shooting changed based on what you need to deliver and how long it takes you to edit?
Like in terms of, in regards to what?
So like, do you shoot less because you're only going to need 20 images from that day? Or
it depends on how I'm feeling. Like that's the thing about like photography and like the artist in me is just like, ultimately it really boils down to like how I'm vibing that day.
Okay.
If I feel really, really good, then I'll probably overshoot a lot.
That's inspiring though, because again, we're creatives who have created a business out of this. And so sometimes it's hard to keep the artistry, right? To keep the creativity. Sometimes when you're like, I know that I don't need to shoot more than 3,000 images on a wedding day, or anything like things like that, that sometimes could maybe deter you from finding the true art in something and documenting it, which is really, thank you for sharing because that checks me.
It also it depends on, the artist too and what they want, no matter how I'm feeling, like I always make sure that there is a usable product delivered. But, on some occasions the product could be better. I just feel like that is the nature of what we do.
Yeah. It also, I feel like it can get monotonous at times being on a tour that's the same show every night, That's
a lot to combat sometimes.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself getting burnt out on that? Or do you think that you just have to find different ways to look at it each day?
It's really weird because I feel like there'll be like a stretch of like extreme inspiration and then there'll be like a slump of burnout. And then somewhere in that burnout, I'll find inspiration again and it's back, it's this constant wave. And
I think I do the same thing.
the cool thing about the tour stuff is that like, yeah, there are moments where it can get really old, but I think the real challenge in it and the artistry in it is finding all of like the little slivers of moments that like didn't happen the day before,
Oh yeah. That's an interesting.
That's incredible. I just, when you think of that, or when you say that, I think of that one picture you took of Jimmy that one time with all the palm trees in the background. And like, that to me is such a huge image that I will probably never forget. And so I think of you and obviously Jimmy in that time of life.
Is that the kind of silhouetted one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one is.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's a banger.
It is. It's so good. I'm like, I hope that's still in your portfolio.
So do you feel like there is anything that you did early on in your career that you absolutely wouldn't do now, whether that's boundaries with a client while on tour or if that's something in the studio, like, and maybe leaning more into like the business side of things than just like the way you shoot or something like that?
So in the very beginning, when I first started freelancing, like first 2 years probably, I guess I kind of had this expectation that people just came to me, and it's like, that isn't really how it works. You've got to
Preach.
you got to go fight for it. You got to go hunt, like I feel like being a freelancer is like living out in the woods by yourself. It's like you have to go gather your resources yourself, so.
Well, you're living out in the woods by yourself, gathering resources with other people who also want the same resources.
Survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
That's such great advice, though. That's amazing.
Now it's different because after those first 2 years, when I finally figured out what I was doing wrong, now it's like I've just got this huge cushion of just like clients and people that I know I can depend on, for me to live and do this full time,
Yeah, that's a good point to make. Like, I feel like that does grow. I feel like with any industry, I definitely have clients that maybe sometimes I'm a little too comfortable with. I know they're going to book me every single year for certain things.
Like, this family should be reaching out to me about now.
But with things being word of mouth, do you feel like you can lend advice on how that really operates for people? Because I feel like we can use a term like that and we understand it. We know what that means. But maybe for someone who's starting out, who's interested in being in a similar field, like, what does that really look like? What do you do to not be, I guess, pestering people that you don't know
how do you get
well?
in those positions of getting word of mouth, right? Because someone has to take a chance on you.
Yeah.
In order for you even to be in the room.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah, just like as an explanation of like someone who has no idea what that even looks like.
I feel like success in the music industry is like a combination of three things. I think it's communication for one. Mm-hmm. 2 is the right timing.
Okay.
And 3 is just getting along with people and learning to work with people. And I feel like whenever you add all 3 of those things together, something is going to come out of it.
Yeah,
that's great.
I feel like being able to talk to the person who you're doing business with is so critically important. I didn't understand that at first, but just learning how to work with people, knowing their communication style, and just kind of like learning how to adapt and work around that, I think can save you so much time, money, and energy.
Do you have any good examples, even if it's vague, of you having to learn how to adapt in a situation when it comes to communication?
I mean, with the touring side, extremely, yeah, because it's like needing to know what's going on without asking too many questions, if that makes any sense. Like I feel like it's all kind of surrounding like what the vibe is, and I know I say that a lot, but I feel like everything in music is about like how you're feeling and what the vibe is.
If you can hang.
If you can hang.
See, I'm not good at hanging. I think that's my problem.
And the unfortunate,
well, unless you want to be a tour photographer.
the unfortunate part about that is like for the touring, I feel like the work always comes second and the hang always comes first.
Interesting.
Which for me, depending on who it is, can be like a really good thing or like a really bad thing. Because obviously there are like some crews and some groups of people that I get along better with than others. But even when that applies, I always try and put the work first because I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first thing you said reminds me of our first episode we actually recorded, which was about communication and how a lot of the times you said it best, right? You thought people were going to come to you. Oh, they're going to hire me because I'm so great or whatever. And I'm an artist and this, all these things. And then that leads into having to find that work and then communicate.
Yeah.
And when you're communicating, you might think you're over communicating and we're like, send the other email, send another email if you think you're over communicating, right? Like it will gain you business. I think it'll keep you in business.
Yeah.
I think it'll give you a great word of mouth reputation, which is how we think we all get our business, And I just think that's such great advice is to communicate.
What do you think are the number one things that someone could do early on in their career that would damage their word of mouth reputation with other people in the industry?
Not giving the work out, for one.
Yeah.
I've met a lot of people who will go and shoot and not give any of the work out. And I'm like, what?
I will say, again, bragging on Peyton, our husbands were on tour. Brendan loves a good photo, and he is on crew. So he doesn't usually get that from any photographers he works with. And you would constantly send the whole crew your albums from the day, and it would include like little BTS photos of them. And even though he's not someone that's going to hire you, he loved that. Like, he really enjoyed it and appreciated getting those images. Versus he's definitely worked with other photographers where he'd be like, hey, can you take this photo of me? And then he never sees the photo. And he's like, well, why did we take it?
Yeah.
So even now, I still do that. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that it was my first tour. But now looking back, I understand the importance of that because I feel like without them, it's not the full story.
Absolutely.
I love that. Yeah.
It's not the full story because I would remember, being out there for the first time, and taking all the photos of the artists and obviously that's really great. But then there's also a whole other group of people who have made this event happen. And without it, it feels like something is missing.
Yeah.
Do you feel like taking that direction has helped your business? Do you feel like you've gotten referrals from any of those people, or do you think it's just a net positive overall?
I think it's just net positive overall.
Yeah.
And my thing too is even if people aren't referring me right off the bat, it's years down the road something could unfold. I've had that happen even now where it's I met someone 5 years ago, haven't heard from them since, and then they just randomly hit me up hey, there's this really high paying gig, do you want it? And I'm like, yeah, good to see you,
Yeah, I remember one time I had a wedding a couple years ago, and she booked me because when I was shooting photos in high school and we went to church together, she had seen some of my work and was like, when I get married, I'm going to hire her. And then she emailed me, and I knew who she was, which is great. Yeah, but it definitely wouldn't have occurred if I had been a rude person in high school, I guess.
Right. Yeah, never burn a bridge.
Yes.
Never do it.
Never burn a bridge.
Ever.
Yeah, and it's great too that your work obviously backs up your personality. That helps too.
Yeah, is that kind of hard to balance sometimes? Do you find yourself maybe trying to make your personality fit the art instead of the other way around?
All the time. Yeah, sometimes I feel it could be challenging for me because I feel like my personality is just a little bit more reserved, and kind of fluffy a little bit. And when I'm on the road, it's everyone's so mean and tough, and I'm just here to do my job, So that's what it can turn into sometimes.
That's amazing.
There's a certain culture on the road, and I don't always adhere by that culture, but I'm still in it. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
How do you find balance in that? What helps you get back to just feeling comfortable being you, or, making sure that your business is still representative of you while you're out there feeling a little uncomfortable sometimes?
There are always some crew guys who I just can really be my 100% self with, and I appreciate that, and I need that.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
That's amazing. Okay, so I do want to ask about the camera, obviously sitting here, and kind of if you want to talk a little bit about how you've been incorporating film, which is a slower process in such a social media driven instant world. Tell us a little bit about your film photography and what you've been doing with that.
So I'd always wanted to get into film for years. It was just like it never made any sense. I never knew how to develop or scan or do anything. It's also kind of like a time and money investment too. So I bought like this Leica. This is a digital camera. I bought the Leica like back in November. Shot with it for a good 4 or 5 months, and I was like, you know what?
Is that worth the price tag?
Yes.
Is it the black and white one?
No, it was not the monochrome.
Okay,
It was
okay.
it was the standard Q. It's like their point and shoot basically. But I'm a huge Leica fanboy.
Okay.
I'll say Leica everything. If I could afford Leica everything, I would probably
I've heard
do
it's
that.
amazing.
Yeah,
I've never heard a bad review about it.
it's always tempting.
It is.
But I had it for 5 or 6 months, and I was like, you know what? I kind of want something new. I want something radical. I just want to do something completely out of my comfort zone. So I sold the Leica, bought this camera, and all the film chemicals, all the film, everything that I needed just to get started.
So you really went for it.
I went.
I
all
didn't
in for
realize
it.
that you were starting to shoot film at the same time that you were starting to process your film.
Yeah.
Oh, I did not realize
Yeah.
that. I know.
But before all this, I think I had shot maybe 3 rolls total in my life, and I'd
Okay.
always brought it to the lab, and I never enjoyed what the lab gave me. I also probably could have like diversified it and sent it to some other people too, but like at that point, it just becomes a lot of money and like a lot of time too.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I feel like the main reason why I haven't gotten into film is because of my lack of control over it all. So it's like, what if I was able to develop and scan it and take all the control over it?
A true artist.
And after that, after I started learning all that, I was like, okay, this is obviously like where it's going artistically. And yeah, like I've just been doing that ever since.
Do you have touring or editorial clients who are interested in the film side of things, or
So-
are you having to push for that?
So professionally, I haven't done a whole lot of things on film. I've done maybe 2 or 3 shoots professionally on film, and all 3 of those were like from people who were already kind of interested in it. I'm getting to the point now though where I'm comfortable enough with film where I'm like, okay, like maybe I could start offering this as like a service, or maybe one day only exclusively shoot film. I think that could be a really big dream.
Yeah.
Especially on the road.
That was my next question. Do you take the chemicals and everything on the road with you?
No,
Not yet.
I'm not comfortable enough
Okay.
to do that.
Have you shot medium format yet?
Yes.
So good, right?
It's better than 35.
Yeah, it
And
is.
it's better than digital in my
Yeah.
opinion.
It's amazing. It's a sweet spot.
Yeah.
I love medium format. Have you shot large format?
So before I bought this, the plan was to go large format.
Okay.
The plan
that was a big jump.
The plan was to do a 4x5 camera,
Yeah.
do everything like that. And then I actually saw the camera in person, got to play with it from a friend. And I was like, I think this is going to be good later down the road.
Yeah.
But I need something that's just like an everyday
More
carry.
mobile. Yeah.
And this is where this came in.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel like, so you said it would be like a dream to shoot only film. Do you have a plan for how you would get there, or do you think that you're just going to see how that unfolds?
I think I'm just going to see how it unfolds, because I feel like right now the main thing that I need to be focusing on is letting people know that that's what I do and that's something that I can offer. Because I feel like it's, for me, like I feel like it's kind of weird to just like announce that, oh, hey, like I'm doing film now. It's like, oh, like I feel like there needs to be, the work A needs to be where it needs to be, and B, it's like people also need to like know that this is just something that I do, you know. So
Yeah, which I feel like you're doing a good job with that, though. Like
Yeah.
you're sharing a lot of your process and your work.
Yeah, you are.
people are very receptive to it too. That's the thing. It's like people are very interested in like that part of the process.
I think it's the contrast of
Yeah.
the fast-paced society that we live in.
Yeah.
And
Well-
the contrast of that.
And that you've been showing like these step-by-steps of what you're doing. So it's not like the typical, like, I pay attention when I'm looking at your developing Instagram stories.
That makes it
'cause I
feel
don't
good.
really know how any of that works.
And I feel like it almost makes you appreciate a film, you know, an image, or even people are obviously into like now shooting Super 8 and things like that. And you almost appreciate it, even though the everyday person may not understand exactly what goes into processing it. They know that it's longer than just taking a picture on your camera or or your phone at the very least, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's really, there's something special about that.
I agree. Well, I think we can probably wrap up a little bit.
Okay.
We do have a final question for you
Yes,
that I
we
think will be a
do.
little bit fun, which
Really
is
excited.
just if you could tell other creatives one piece of advice, anything, what would that one thing be?
Keep working. Don't stop. Never stop. I've had a lot of moments throughout my career. I'll say I've been freelancing for 6 years now. Freelancing for 6 years, and throughout that time, I've had a lot of moments where I'm just like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like I'm just like I'm so tired. I'm so over it. And for me, the biggest reward out of everything is just knowing that I can keep doing it. The work is always going to be there, and that if I just keep holding out just a little bit longer, something bigger and better is going to come around the corner. You know.
Which that really is true. I feel
Yeah.
like whenever I get really in a rut is when things start going
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Like
When you're like, I'm quitting my job. I'm getting a regular job.
at least
I don't want to
once-
do my taxes anymore.
At least once a week, I tell Brendan, I just need to go get a 9 to 5. I need to not think when I get home from work.
I feel like freelancing, like it requires so much grit and mental dexterity, and it's like you've got to just keep going even when the times are tough, because one day when you decide to look back at the work, you know, you're going to be very thankful that, you know, you decided to stick it out.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I loved our conversation.
No, that was fun. Thank you
great.
for joining us.
Yeah.
Super, super great.
Thanks for being our first guest.
So where can people find you if they want to look at your work? Where can they find your information?
My website, peytondollar.co, or my Instagram is at PeytonC Dollar.
It was good to talk to you.
You're the best.
Glad I could be here.
Peace out.